with a very interesting background. For those of you who don't know, I put on my college applications that I was African American. I mean, it was true. My mom was from Africa, my father's from New Jersey. Okay. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to tell you a bit of my family's history dating back to the Jews in Spain. Most of this information would not have been possible without the extensive work done by my grandfather, Jack Cansino, back in the 60s. My grandfather was legally blind from diabetes, but found the tools he needed to research his family back to the 1400s. I've brought with me the Cansino Family History book, which is on this table, that he and his daughter, Gladys Cansino Lehman, put together. My Aunt Gladys is an accomplished artist and did all the graphics in the book. This book is held in the Beth Haba Museum and Archives and in the American Jewish Archives. So, in the beginning, the Inquisition dealt only with Christian nonconformers and did not interfere with the affairs of Jews. However, disputes about Maimonides' books provided a reason for harassing the Jews, and in 1242, the Inquisition condemned the Talmud and burned thousands of volumes. In 1288, the first mass burning of Jews on the stake took place in France. Fast forward, and in 1481, the Inquisition started in Spain and ultimately surpassed the medieval Inquisition. Important word, conversos, or secret Jews, and new Christians were targeted because of their close relations to the Jewish community, many of whom were Jews in all but their name. Fear of Jewish influence led Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand to write a petition to the Pope asking permission to start an inquisition in Spain. In 1483, Tomás de Torquemada became the Inquisitor General for most of Spain. He set tribunals in many cities. Also heading the Inquisition in Spain were two Dominican monks. They arrested the conversos and notable figures in Seville. And in Seville, more than 700 conversos were burned at the stake. Tribunals were also opened in Aragon, Catalonia, and Valencia. An Inquisition tribunal was set up in Ciudad Real, where 100 conversos were condemned, and it was moved to Toledo in 1485. It's a lot of dates. Between 1486 and 1492, people were burned at the stake and others were imprisoned. The Inquisition finally made its way to Barcelona, where it was resisted at first because of the important place of Spanish conversos in the economy and society. More than 13,000 conversos were put on trial during the first 12 years of the Spanish Inquisition. Hoping to eliminate ties between the Jewish community and conversos, the Jews of Spain were expelled in 1492, and all of their property was confiscated. The Cansino family was a Spanish Jewish family famous in history for its wealth and influence, its scholars and poets. Isaac Cansino was born in Seville, Spain in 1440. And at the time of the Inquisition, he became a Marrano Jew and changed his biblical name of Isaac Cansino to Pedro Fernandez. I could have been Susie Fernandez. Isaac is the top of the chart, and this works its way down. He was the town councilor of Seville. He took part in the conspiracy with the Marrano Jews against the Inquisition under the leadership of Don Diego de Susan in the year 1480. Jacob Cansino I was also born in Seville, Spain in 1489. He served as an interpreter in Oran, which was an important Spanish colony in Algeria, of northwestern Africa. He was granted the coat of arms. Wrong slide. Go forward. Go forward again. He was granted the coat of arms by Charles V on the occasion of his being given the title of nobleman, and was appointed by Charles V to be the Spanish ambassador to the King of Morocco in 1556. And this is still Jacob Cansino. He held that position until his death in 1568. The office was then held in regular succession, the ambassador to the King of Morocco, by his son, Isaac, until 1599, by his grandson, Chaim, until 1621, and by his great-grandson, Aaron, in 1633. There was a 3-year period before Aaron's brother Jacob Cansino II was appointed by King Philip IV of Spain to be the ambassador to the King of Morocco, and served until his death in 1666. Jacob Cansino translated from Hebrew to Castilian the book by Rabbi Moses Almocino, Extremis y Grandeza de Constantinople. This book was printed in Madrid in 1638, and the preface is written by the minister, the count, and the Duke of Olivares, to whom Jacob Cansino had rendered political services in Iran. It is believed to be the first book of Hebrew literature to be printed in Spain after the Inquisition. It was printed in Madrid in 1638 and can be found in the museums of London and Madrid. Other prominent members of the Cansino family were Solomon Cansino, who was a poet, Moses Cansino, a scholar, Samuel Cansino was a cantor in the synagogue and a very wealthy philanthropist who ultimately lost his entire fortune to gambling. Rabbi Abraham Cansino II was the secretary of the Jewish community of Oran, Spain. Abraham ben Jacob Cansino went to Italy in 1668 when the Jews were expelled from Oran by the governor Marquis de les Rais. Abraham Cansino and his son Isaac decided to go back to Spain and were arrested by the Spanish authorities for having in their possession copies of the Babylonian and Jewish Talmuds. Both were sent to Murcia, Spain, where they were treated as prisoners for a time and fined. The copies of the Talmud were confiscated. Isaac was finally ransomed in 1699 with funds provided by his family and the Bevis Marks Synagogue in London. Records show that a sum of 0.20 pesos was paid and he was released. It wasn't worth much. Or maybe the peso was worth a lot then. From here, the more recent relatives were from Italy, Portugal, Gibraltar, and Morocco. The Cansinos became identified with Morocco at the beginning of the 16th century, and they were serving as royal interpreters to the Spanish royal family in Oran, which at the time was a Spanish colony. For over 110 years, the Cansinos held the title of Spanish ambassadors to the King of Morocco. After all Jews were expelled from Iran in 1669, the Cansinos moved to Leghorn, now known as Livorno, Italy, and then to the British colony of Gibraltar. 3 generations of Cansinos lived in Gibraltar, and one daughter married Sir Joseph Hassian, who was the mayor of Gibraltar. I have not had any relatives born in Spain after the beginning of the 1800s. Don't change it, Lynn. Go back one. No. Sorry. These are my great-grandparents, Chaim and Minnie Cansino. They were both born in Gibraltar, but their individual families later moved to Manchester, which is where they met. The Sephardic community was small, so it was inevitable that they might find each other there. Minnie's father, Isaac David Belisha, was one of the 39 founding members of the Manchester Sephardic Synagogue in 1872. There they met and married and moved to Casablanca for the next 20 years. And it's interesting, in the Manchester Synagogue are seats with my relatives' names on them, dating back to Chaim and Minnie. Chaim and Minnie had 8 children, all born in Casablanca, and one of which is my grandfather, Jack Cansino, who was the youngest. He's on the end. We have timelines of every family dating back before Chaim with grandparents, parents, children, and it gives information about where they were born, who was in their wedding, who their rabbi was that married them. Pretty cool. At this time, the family was dealing in textiles in Casablanca, mainly cotton. Chaim's company expanded and the family moved back to Manchester, England, where the Sephardic merchants had been relocating. However, most of their trade was between England and Morocco. One of my grandfather, Jack's, Chaim's youngest son, when he became of age, they asked him to represent the family in Casablanca. So he moved back for the first time since he was 1 year old, and there he met a distant Moroccan cousin and married my grandmother, Ruby Saboni. Those are my grandparents. They lived in Casablanca and had 4 daughters, Minnie, Evelyn, Gladys, and Gloria. All 4 were fluent in their native tongue, French, and in English, which their father spoke fluently. But Spanish and Arabic were spoken in the home as well. They were raised Orthodox. So growing up in my house, my mother and her sisters would always say things in French so we couldn't understand, and my father and his relatives would all talk in Yiddish. So my mother and my father couldn't understand each other, but they got their point across. Meanwhile, there was an American actress rising in stardom, and we all thought she was a distant relative of ours. Margarita Carmen Cansino was making movies, but they portrayed her as way too Spanish. So they changed her hairline, colored her hair red, and changed her name to Rita Hayworth. With all my grandfather's research, he could not find a connection between that bombshell and our family. And actually, Hayworth was her mother's maiden name. Now the family was flourishing in their textile business between England and Morocco. But my grandfather saw that Japan was becoming an emergent market. He broke away from the family business and began his own import-export company called Comatex. He made one 6-month trip to Japan to set his business in order, returning in 1937. 2 years later, England declared war on Germany. My Papa Jack's cousin, Leslie Horbelisha, was then Great Britain's Secretary of War. Leslie Belisha kept the family informed because they couldn't trust the news coming from Morocco. In 1940, Jack realized he needed visas for the family, and because of his close relations with the British Club, he was able to secure visas for his family and his in-laws. The problem became how to flee French Morocco. I'm reading now from a book that my cousin, Lewis Held Jr., put together, which has a lot of what's in the Cansino book, but also chats he had with my grandfather, his mother, who was the oldest, and other documents that he found. Jack knew that his family was no longer safe when he saw British sailors arrested. This is a quote from my grandfather. I saw that it was getting time to leave as the British fleet had fired on the French fleet at just outside Oran in Algiers. And from then on, the attitude of the French was very bad indeed. And one evening, driving home from my business place, I saw the police wagon full of British merchant marine officers going to prison. The British consular staff had also left, and French soldiers were on guard outside the British consulate. As the American